cash flow, and when people are buying properties, they get cash flow rent mixed up with equity. They sometimes chase the cash flow, but let's talk about it. When you're buying a property, how do you consider and calculate your cash flow?
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Billy.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty sore. Fell off a motorbike.
Tell the world.
Fell off a trail bike on a farm. So, but I'm going to be okay. Everyone, don't stress.
We're saying it's quite hard to be cool, isn't it? It's hard to maintain.
Yeah.
We will have our moments.
We're just saying off air. There's some people that just are very, very cool, and how do they maintain it? It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's not for all of us.
It's not, buddy. So listen, cash flow. You want to talk about cash flow? I want to talk about cash flow. And when it comes to property, there's some tricks. Tell us.
Cash flow is king, surely. Everyone wants to see the dollars in the pocket. But will that compromise capital growth? We were talking about capital growth earlier in the week, how wonderful it is.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you need the money coming in to pay the bills, because the capital growth is more long term. And how that can potentially sway people into buying, a particular suburb or particular house versus apartment. But yeah,
it's interesting, and I think that most of us have a short-term view. You looking at what's going to happen in the next week or next month, and it's pretty hard to ignore it, even though we're taught to think long-term, care for the future, save for the future. It's very hard. Just look at what's under your nose. So when people are considering cash flow, or when people are considering properties, it's pretty easy to chase the property with a good rent, and just almost forget about or put to the side capital growth, which is how much that property goes up over the course of its life.
Yeah, it's big. So, do you want to talk a little bit about how much it can vary?
Yeah, sure. And do you know what else, Billy? It's not only can it vary a lot, but it's quite wild what a difference how it can compound. So people, when you're looking at property yield, or when you're looking at property capital growth. So just to understand, for people that don't know, yield, your rent coming in is what you're getting per week. You put that over the value of the property. It's called yield. I'm just going to move that camera. Then your value of your property, well, what you bought it for. If you look at the growth you made, so you say you buy it for 500, and say it's worth $1 million. So it's made 500. 500 over 500, you put it over the amount that you purchased for. 500 over 500, it's made 100% capital growth, which is double. So capital growth over the course of the investment was 100%, and rent along the course of the investment, as an easy example, let's call it 5%, 5.25, whatever. That is equivalent to $500 a week. Now, people are often chasing the $500 a week more than they are chasing the capital growth, that $500,000 for when you sell it. That's our point this morning, because it actually starts to compound. So you actually start to, that rental return goes up ever so slightly if you look at the trends lately. But if you look at the capital growth, it just explodes. But you can't spend it. That's the problem. So cash flow often, people are chasing cash flow and they almost don't care about how much the value of the property goes up.
Yeah. And so we were talking about, do some people only look for cash flow as it's maybe more short term? But also, is property a good investment for cash flow? Because rental yields are going down as property becomes more expensive, but rent's sitting relatively the same.
What's the question? There's a couple of questions in there. What's the first one?
The first one was, why would someone choose cash flow just short term?
You know what?
Be made.
Yeah, age is one of them. So I think sometimes when people get a bit more senior, they've got a lot of money stuck in property, as in equity. Just want to see if we've got any comments here this morning. Luke, g'day, buddy. Cash flow holds the property, and growth accelerates the wealth creation. It's well put. So often people, depending on their age, will chase different things. So particularly when people are older, because the banks want they want cash flow. They want to know you got the ability to hold the property, like Luke said, and pay for the property. But that you want that. You don't want to just be paying it for no reason. So when a lot of people, as they get older, they realise that their 40-hour week, 50-hour week, 60-hour week work is going to taper off, and they need cash flow to survive. So they don't want to sell the property or crystallise the property by having it sold. They want to have cash flow. So a lot of older people will start to invest in commercial property or higher cash flow properties, higher yielding properties, because they want to live off it and they don't want to sell it.
Interesting. So you could be even looking not just from suburb to suburb, but the class of property as well, so ranging from resi to commercial.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And ages, and particularly young. Yeah, obviously, peak earnings for people are I think earnings sort of grow from 20s to 30s to 40s, and I think peak earnings is in the mid to late 40s in the corporate world. That's probably designates how people invest a little bit as well. As they get older, they'll start chasing that cash flow.
Yeah, interesting. So that sort of leads on to the next question. Do you think with property becoming more expensive, rents are sitting reasonably the same on your equation? That means rental yield is getting, slightly worse. Does that mean if property is still the investment it was, cash flow wise, 10 years ago?
Yeah, look, there's been I'll bring it up. There's been a big pressure on cash on return on investment for property. Fortunately, Billy, it's been helped with low interest rates. That's really helped. The low interest rate environment has helped people retain those properties and been good for cash flow. And the reason why is if people were typically paying 5 or 6% interest rate, and now they're paying 2% to hold the asset, it's so much cheaper, but the rents were moderately the same or a little bit more. So it's a little bit artificial, but yields have been going down, but investors haven't really cared that much because the interest rates have been very, very low. I'm going to bring up units. I'm going to bring up DY rental yield, and I'm going to show you what 10 years looks like.
But that's good because
it's pretty.
In a way, that means you're not losing out as such. You're just maintaining what it was originally, and then plus the capital growth, which is the big one.
Yeah, so if we pull up DY, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, we can see that. That's where everyone
Steady
needs to
hand.
That's it. Perfect.
So it started up. It started high, and this is 10 years. So there's been a big downward pressure on yield. Just to read those numbers out, it used to sit at a 5.2% yield in 2011. Now it's sitting at a 3.6% yield and still continuing downwards. So as those prices go up, it puts pressure on those yields.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So we're talking
that
the
sucks.
difference of 2%.
Yep.
Just a bit more. But, you know, with that rental yield going down slightly, like you talked about, the external factors of your interest rates, capital growth, it does make up a little bit for it.
It does. But, you know, my advice after all this good advice, if I do say so myself, is you must remember, if you are getting a 3, 4, or 5% yield on a property, so on the total value, it's returning 3, 4, or 5%. We haven't even spoken about Strata Water Council. Let's push that aside. If you are getting a 10% a year return on the property, that means you can add 10% to 13, 15%. You are getting a 13 total, even though you can't spend it straight away. You're getting 13 to 15% return on your money on your property. So the problem is, this is the problem. People buy apartments, they chase the yield, they do not get any, or they get shit capital growth. So they get 6 or 7% return instead of getting 500 a week for 500,000, and they will ignore the capital growth trend of that suburb the last 30, 40, 50 years, 10 years, 5 years.
Yeah. So moral of the story, just look longer term, because it shouldn't be a short term game anyway. It's harder to be a short term game.
It's hard when you've got stamp duty and agents fees to get in and out. It's expensive, so it really is a long term game. But my advice is off the back of what you just said. Look at that. Add the yield percentage return per year. Please consider an educated guess, and it is a guess, on the capital growth. Capital growth, I don't like speculative capital growth. I like proven capital growth. I like suburbs that have been heroes for generations. You know, suburbs like Manly or Bondi, or, you know, good suburbs. I don't like people sort of speculating on an airport to go in, or on a suburb that's going to be subdivided or something like that. So stick with proven stuff and add the rental yield to the capital growth, and that's the long-term approach I believe we should all have with property.
There you go. Buy when young. That's what Luke says.
Yeah, it's key, because don't forget, guys, it compounds. If you get those percentages right, if you got your 3 to 5% return and you got your 10% capital growth a year, that becomes a monster after 7 or 8 years. Takes 7 or 8 years to double. And to give you an example, Billy, DY, like for instance, houses in our area have done 200% in 10 years. So they haven't got that good a rental return. They've only got a 2 or 3% rental return houses, even less than units. Houses are worse generally with cash flow than units. But when you look at our suburbs in the last 10 years, and you consider it was only a 2 or 3% capital growth, what happens when you add that to a 10% or 20% a year? That's 22 to 23% a year on the value of the property.
Yeah, big.
Massive. If you bought a house for 500k in Narrowena, Wheeler Heights, Cromer in our area, that property would have doubled to $1 million and doubled to $2 million in 10 years, but would have only given you about $700 or $800 a week rent. Rubbish cash flow, good capital growth. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't. You can't afford to even keep the property if it's got such a rubbish return.
It's interesting though. So someone like that might have gone elsewhere and completely, overlooked Narrowena, DY, Chroma, just because it's maybe not even feasible at the start to hold a property with such low rental return. Yeah, maybe they need the cash
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And that's why they call you Billy the cash flow kid.
Yeah, that's something like that.
Mate, have a great day, guys, and watch out for that cash flow. Thanks, Billy.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
See you, mate.